What's going on, everyone? We are pretty deep into set 3 meta, but we've talked a lot about the best decks. The Han Yellows, the Sabines, the Quinlins, the Jangos. This video is for those of you that may be looking to bring something a little bit more spicy, but still have a very good competitive chance of taking a win. These are just under the S, and if you want to consider Han Yellow the double S tier, we've got Sabine, Quinlan, and things like Django Red, for example, in the S tier. We're looking at the A tier, the tier 2 options just behind them for you all to pick up and destroy your planetary qualifiers. Big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. Thank you for supporting the channel. And also, absolutely a blast playing in these weekly tournaments with you all. And also, I have a TCG player link in the description down below. Be sure to use it for all your Star Wars Unlimited card needs. Let's dive in to some planetary qualifier. Tier 2 meta decks. Starting us off with one of my favorite lists in general, Bossk Green. Now, this is absolutely an insanely powerful list with the ability to do some of the most explosive things that any deck can do in general. And that's mainly due to Bossk's ability to double claim bounties. Really, when we're looking at the bounties that we want to double claim, we're looking at Bounty Hunter's Quarry and Price on Your Head. Price on Your Head, especially with things like Super Laser Technician on turn 2, can give you access to potentially, and this is absolutely possible in a lot of games, potentially 7 resources on turn 3. 7 resources. On turn 3, you're able to play a Darth Vader. And I don't mean just getting the 7 resources available to you. I mean actually using them. You can do something like turn 1, Price on Your Head, ping it with Bossk. Turn 2, Super Laser Technician, ping that unit again with Bossk. Potentially. Turn 3, you go ahead and hit your Super Laser Technician into one of their units, get the resource, deploy Bossk, attack the unit with Price on Your Head, double claim, play a Darth Vader. That is absolutely absurd. But it's not just about that. As I mentioned with the Bounty Hunter's Core, you get access to potentially playing this essentially 1 resource, 3 resource play. So 1 resource, so 2 resource discount on things like Cell Block Guard, Phase 3 Dark Trooper, Punishing One, Super Laser Technician, or even the Client, an out of aspect card that really synergizes with the deck well. The whole name of the game for this deck is Ramp Hard, play expensive stuff, and absolutely overwhelm your opponent. But then you could also just really dominate the early game, which is kind of surprising in a deck like this because of something like Bounty Hunter's Quarry. Double claiming this and being able to play 2 3 resource plays alongside getting a 4/6 down on the ground early on in the game can absolutely overwhelm your opponent. So it attacks on multiple different angles and can really do some amazing work. This list also is pretty interesting because it has very minimal turn 1 units. And that's just because you have so many different bounties to play on turn 1. Deathmark, Price on Your Head, Bounty Hunter's Quarry, as well as things like Silencer give you those turn 1 options when you don't really have units that you want to play. This gives you that option to not play any early game units so that you have a ton of 3 resource plays to take full advantage of Bounty Hunter's Quarry and play all of the expensive cards. This list does extremely well in what it's trying to do, which is play a Crate Dragon extremely early into the game. And it can do it pretty consistently. It is exceptionally powerful. And I've noticed that in a meta where you have a lot of Tarkin towns, something like Bossk Green really shines because Bossk Green can come in, avoid playing early game units, set up bounties, so just dealing with your opponent's units, and then they lose a lot of the strength that Tarkin Town provides, which is basically setting you back in the early stages of the game. This deck just kind of skips that in some matchups, and that can be extremely powerful. Definitely one of my lists that I just keep coming back to over and over and over again. Next up, we've got Palp Yellow, and this is very variable, but it is one of those lists that I have been playing since set 1. I have absolutely loved Palpatine Yellow. This is probably my favorite list of the 5 that we're going to be talking about today. Bossk Green just behind it. But Palp Yellow was the deck I chose to play in our patron tournament because I've just had a lot of fun with this list. The whole idea behind it is you get to use all these sort of weaker cards, these cards that don't do a whole lot, but maybe produce multiple bodies, or maybe just have this awesome setup, or maybe have the official tag because you get to play Emperor's Royal Guard. So you get down some of these early units, you're able to draw a bunch of cards using Palpatine's action, you're going to be ramping hard with Ray Supply, Super Laser Technicians, and in some cases, some decks are playing Price on your head. But more importantly, you get to play a bunch of big units, and you have cunning to back you up. So you have things like No Good to Me Dead, or Change of Heart, or Waylays to really stall out your opponent. Because it's pretty indisputable that Palpatine himself is the payoff in this deck. If you're able to get to the late game, unlike a Bossk, for example, where you kind of want those Darth Vaders or those Mauls or those Reinforcement Walkers to play, if you just play a bunch of cheap stuff and then you steal their biggest thing, that's a payoff in of itself, and that oftentimes can win you a game straight up. But that doesn't mean we're not playing those expensive stuff. We've got Darth Vaders, Reinforcement Walkers, Devastators, Mauls, all the good stuff to back up Palpatine, and you could pull off some of the most crazy combos in the game. I shouldn't say combo, but synergies. Things like Change of Heart on their Reinforcement Walker or their big unit, going in and killing their other units and then defeating it with your own Palpatine ability can lead to some absurd turns for you. But I also want to call out one of the more important cards in this list that might be a little unassuming for those of you that are playing against a lot of Han Yellows, and that is Scanning Officer. This is one of those cards that can really disrupt a Han Yellow. Let's say they go ahead and turn 1 resource one of their Hotshot Blasters or one of their DJs or something like that, and they're sitting on a 3 resource play in hand. Well, turn 1, you just play a Scanning Officer, reveal all their resources, defeat potentially one of those, and then guess what? That card that gets smuggled back in, or the card that gets taken from the top of their deck back into the resource pile, enters exhausted. So you could potentially disrupt their early plays, and then it sets you up for an amazing turn 2 because you are going to have an official unit alongside that Scanning Officer. They are set back. They no longer have those units in the smuggle pile. Maybe you've even disrupted the DJ combo. It is excellent stuff. And I'll say that does not happen uncommonly because it is very often you'll see a Han Yellow in your games, and it is also very often that people just default to resourcing their smuggle cards. And of course, just after talking about Han, we've got to talk about a different flavor of Han, which is Han Green. At least in terms of wins and in terms of my experience, this is definitely a weaker variant of Han Yellow, or Han in general, but it does something that, well, I'm sure a lot of you had a lot of fun early on into set 1, which is go for the Han Solo Ewing Reinforcement, extremely powerful play on turn 4, or rather turn 5. Wait, no, turn 4. Turn 4, you've got that 5 resources. You go ahead and put a resource down with Han, boosting you up to 6 resources. Deploy Han, get an attack in. You got the 7 resources. And because we are playing this Han Green, we've got the Ewing Reinforcement to go ahead and search up things like Luke Skywalker, or heck, even things like Cad Bane. These powerful 7 resource plays that can completely dominate a game. But alongside it, you still get to play the Tech DJ combo. Tech himself and DJ, that combo completely bypasses the double cunning requirement of DJ. Of course, you are going to need Tech and DJ for that to work, generally speaking, because in double yellow Han, you can play this for 7, but we're going to be stuck with this for 9. So you really want Tech and DJ together, but, and this is quite important, you could get this down a turn earlier, generally speaking, with Resupply. Turn 1, you could play something like Resupply into turn 2 Tech, into turn 3 DJ, which is an extremely powerful curve and will guarantee that you're going to completely dominate your opponents if you're able to actually pull that off. Of course, you get to back this up with things like Marauder, Home 1, some powerful space units. Marauder especially giving you that ambusher in space, which we've seen so frequently. Space decks coming in and doing some good work. Home 1 bringing back some units from the discard pile. Of course, some more disruptive elements in the early game. Things like Echo-based Defender giving Sentinels or modded cohorts ambushing your opponent's ground units. But you got a lot of ramp. You get to play your 7 resource plays more frequently. And you're still playing Han Solo himself, which is a very powerful deck. Next up, we get to return to an old classic, I suppose not that old, but a classic nonetheless in our meta, which is Rey Red. Definitely similar to your Anakin Blues out there, but with a few different modifications that are just really good in Rey. Things that can really get pumped up extremely high. Things like Regional Governor, getting the ability to disrupt your opponent as well as get these experience counters. Things like R2-D2 becoming potentially 3/7s or 3/6s rather in your games, which can completely dominate the early game. But also you're able to compete in the early game, whereas Anakin Blue, if you don't have the initiative, can sometimes struggle because of Tarkin Town itself. Now, you didn't really get anything new in this new set. Perilous Position, basically the only one that you're getting, but, and this is really important, it's still extremely powerful. Rey deploying with that Restore 3 can really keep you in the game for a lot longer than you normally would think. You still got Crate Dragons and Luke Skywalkers in the late game to completely dominate your opponent. You're still playing that Force synergy deck with Yoda's, Kanan's, Obi-Wan's, Luke's alongside Force throws. You're still attacking your opponent's hand with Pillages, and you are still playing a soft control deck with the soft control events like Takedown and Vanquish in the deck. It is an extremely solid list. I wouldn't say as explosive as the other ones that we've talked about. Honestly, all 3 of the other ones that we've spoken about are just more explosive. You have the Bossk Green, which can ramp extremely quickly. You have the Palpatine Yellow, which can do the change of heart, steal your guy, do all this nonsense. You even have the previous deck that we spoke about, which is that Han Green, doing the Tech DJ combo even early. This is some good old-fashioned, solid trading card gameplay. If you're going to play a deck that seems probably one of the more fair lists in the format, Rey Red is the deck you're looking for. This is just going to get some incremental value with the experience tokens, keep you in the game with the restoration, some pretty good synergy with the Force synergies, and then just playing strong cards like Poe Dameron, Luke's, and Crate Dragons, as I mentioned. And to finish us off in the top 5 of these tier 2 options, Krennic ECL. And I do suggest ECL because this guy is capable of supporting it. So why ECL over 30 HP bases, which we're seeing pretty frequently in these more soft control decks? I think that's the first place we got to start because it's probably one of the strongest cards in the list. Krennic's got that Restore 2 on the leader body early on into the game, which can help mitigate those less HP that you have, alongside with some powerful synergies that go with Energy Conversion Lab. You're able to make up that 5 HP, and oftentimes ECL is, in general, going to be a stronger option. If you're able to survive potentially past that early game aggression, you can really start to outvalue your opponents. You got things like Rook, which is one of the best options with ECL because it's guaranteed to kill any non-leader unit on the ground, assuming they don't have shield in, while sticking around as a 3/6 and being able to kill another thing immediately after that, which is absolutely crazy. You do have the Steadfast Battalion, which looks pretty good as well, alongside Krennic being a 7/7 or pumping something else. Of course, you have some earlier game units like General Grievous and such. Consortium Star Viper being ECL'd out is extremely powerful. But what about new cards? Well, as I mentioned, we did get that General Grievous. One of the more important ones, however, in Krennic is Royal Guard Attaché, coming down as essentially just a 2-resource 3/3, which is really strong in Krennic. Turn 1, a 3/3 in the ground is actually just powerful. Who knew? It is just really good. But because we're playing that command vigilance villainy as we are all so used to, we've got the classics such as Overwhelming Barrage, we've got Fell the Dragons, Power of the Dark Sides, we're doing a little bit of ramping with Resupply, we've got Vigilance for the late game, and of course, because we're playing that soft control list, we've got Darth Vader's as our finishers, or rather our board parity into Reinforcement Walker, Snoke's, and Avengers as our finishers. It's just overall a powerful list. It just plays a lot of valuable units. It plays a lot of really strong removal options, and it has some of the best late game in the game in Avengers, Snokes, Vaders, and Reinforcement Walkers. It is definitely the control list of any of the one that we've talked about here, but it's a little bit more interesting than something like Bossk because you do get in a lot of combat with Krennic. This guy restoring, you really want to get him down early to start that process. ECL gives you that dynamic of being able to contest the early game portions, which generally other soft control decks have a hard time doing. This does a lot, and it's a little bit more active than your other controlling lists, and it's definitely a lot of fun. But that's going to be your top 5 tier 2 or A tier lists, just under the S tier lists that we had seen for weeks and weeks on end. If you're looking for something a little bit more spicy, a little bit interesting to spice up your gameplay, these are some of the lists that maybe you want to go with. While spicing, you want to have a chance to win, and these definitely give you that chance. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you all for the next one.